What we'll do is just have you introduce yourselves, share a little bit about your current role with your company, and any other fascinating facts that might help us get started on a good level this afternoon. And Peter, we'll start down with you, and guys, we'll just work our way back to me.
Thanks, Bill. Good afternoon, everybody. Peter Kelly. I'm the president of digital services at Car Auction Services. So in that role, I oversee a number of the digital business models, the digital channels at Car, and been at Car now 6 years. Prior to that, I was a co-founder of OpenLane, so I've been in the industry for almost 20 years since we started OpenLane. Thanks.
Welcome. Glad to have you with us. Nick?
Yeah, my name's Nick Peluso, and I'm currently president of Mannheim Digital Services and Remarketing and RMS. I've had this role now, for the Mannheim role, for about the last 6 months, RMS for the past 4 years, and prior to that, I was head of sales and marketing for Mannheim Auctions, and prior to that, I was head of sales and marketing for ADT. I've been in the industry about 30 years.
I had an interesting, Nick, and I didn't share this with you. We were doing some work leading up to the conference the other week, and I was going through some old photographs. And photographs don't exist anymore. It's all on your phone, right? We're looking through some of them through our first event in 1999. Do you remember that at the Camelback in Scottsdale?
Yes. Yeah.
And the Peluso hairdo was a little taller at that point. I don't know.
It's a little picture right there.
A little taller, a little longer.
Yeah. It was, yeah.
And I was a lot
definitely
younger.
a party in the back, for sure.
I was a lot younger. Yeah.
Yeah. So I meant to mention that to you earlier because I didn't know how you would react to that, but that's good. You played it off, man. It's all good. Anyway,
Can't change
Nick,
the truth.
Yeah, I know. Nick, we're glad to have you with us. That's good. Dave.
Hi, good evening. Dave Copeland. I'm the Chief Operations Officer for American Recovery Service and for Skipbusters. I've been in the industry about 12 years. I've held the current role since about 2010. Transitioned from law enforcement into this field, and being that we are an investigative service company, about a third of our business, was a nice transition. Glad to be here today.
Yeah, Dave, we're glad to have you with us. And Brian.
Yeah, good afternoon. My name is Brian Scudda. I'm with TrueCar. I've been with TrueCar overseeing our dealer business since March of last year. Prior to that, I spent 12 years at Cox Automotive, where I got to work with the Trade and Marketplace and ran Vin Solutions, the CRM company. And in between Cox and TrueCar, I spent 2 years as the CEO of AutoAlert, which is a data equity mining company. I did go back and look for a picture of me in 1999, but I didn't have hair on that one either, so we just kept it as is.
Yeah, it was funny. It was like an Eckerd drug. We had it developed at some drugstore. It was kind of a funny thing. I'll send that to you. You post it somewhere.
Appreciate that.
We'll do it. Yeah, absolutely. Happy to help. Let's start off. I think that, as we've, and those of you who have been with us over the years, know that we've played off this point a number of times, but with the unique timing when we all kind of gather as an industry at Used Car Week, it really does provide an opportunity for us to, with some integrity, look back at the year that has been, but it's also an ideal time for us to look ahead as well. And we'll try to do a little bit of that this afternoon with these gentlemen, all with unique experience and deep background in the automotive space. But Peter, let's start with you on that end. I mean, as you look back at 2017, what strikes you as highlights in the used car space that you think are transitional or transformative type moments?
Sure. Thanks, Bill. I guess as I look back, first of all, I think it's been a pretty good year. I think we've had a solid economy. Continues to do well here. We're on a pretty long expansion there on the economy at this point, and I think that has flowed through into our industry. The SAR has been pretty good at the wholesale level. Volumes have been up somewhat versus prior years again. So continuing that growth, that's good for our industry. Driven by a lot by off-lease cars. So we've seen that we're approaching sort of maybe a high point of off-lease in the coming year or two, I would say. Repo volume has been pretty strong as well, I think, based on the data we look at. So that's all good. And I think the other thing that has been maybe a highlight for me is I think it's a year when we've really seen the power of digital channels and digital offerings, not just in our business, but just everywhere. I think we've all known for a long time that digital is coming, it's changing our personal lives, it's changing all these industries, media, shopping, whatever. But I really feel it's starting to have a really big impact in automotive. So whether we look at retail, I think we're seeing impacts on some digital disruptors there with Car Gurus and Carvana, 2 IPOs this year. In our wholesale volume, we're seeing a lot of growth in digital channels. We did some digital acquisitions this year at CAR. Those were highlights for us and for me personally. TradeRev and Driven, expand the set of offerings we have. So, I just think that that digital future really is one, not just for our industry, but for all industries. And to be successful in any business, we just have to be, I think listening to our customers, but our customers are asking us to be digital.
Certainly.
So I think that's kind of the lesson for me this year.
Yep. Brian and then Nick, I'd like your opinions on what you're seeing as well. What are you taking away from looking back at 2017? Brian and then Nick.
Sure. I think for me, there's two things that stand out. I think while the SAR was healthy, it did level off versus continued years of growth. And I think what you've seen is retailers adjust to that, specifically a lot of focus on cost and cost reduction and cleaning up their back office to be able to maintain profitability in a plateaued SAR and being very mindful with their debt and with their capital investment. Coming out of that also from the world that I sit in, there's been a lot of renewed interest in conquest amongst the OEMs and amongst dealers. So basically making sure they grow their brand from taking from others. And while it's always a staple of what they do, from our perspective, we've seen a lot more increase in our platform because of that focus. And then the second one that's been really big in my part of the world has been marketing attribution. So specifically digital attribution. And the promise of marketing dollars being measurable has been something that's been somewhat of a challenge for the industry. So as all the money has shifted from traditional to digital, if you look at NADA's cost per vehicle retail and the advertising side, it's remained flat. And in fact, it's gone up year over year from 2015 to 2016. So what you're seeing in a margin compressed business with a leveling SAR, you're seeing a lot of focus among retailers, making sure that they understand the attribution of their advertising dollars. And that's something I think they're just starting to uncover, and it's not an easy puzzle piece, but it's something we're going to see a focus on going forward as well.
Yeah. Nick, your thoughts?
Yeah, I think this past year has been an interesting one. I think a lot of us thought going into this year that we'd see another trend like we've seen in the past with the off-lease vehicles and I'll call it the flood back to the wholesale market. And we really didn't see that. I mean, values remained strong. We saw good growth on CPO and seen huge lift in CPO over the last 8-10 months, which has kept the used car market really, really strong. That's been a pleasant surprise. When I think back over the 30 years, and we've seen these cycles, about every 5 years, leasing takes off, vehicles come back, residual values crash, people get out of the market. We haven't seen that, and I don't think we're going to see that. We've seen the franchise dealers really get into understanding how to sell used cars, which has been a huge plus. We've seen large independents, the CarMaxes of the world and other people really start to understand how to market and compete in that arena. So from just the wholesale side and the cars coming back, a pleasant surprise. For the company I work for, Cox Automotive, we've also had some pleasant surprises. Just the integration of these different companies that we've acquired over the last several years is starting to come to life. So again, a lot of pluses across the horizon.
Thank you. And Dave, I mean, obviously your position in the repossession space in particular, can you share with us some of your thoughts and what executives you and others at your company are looking at as you kind of begin to close out the 2017 calendar?
Absolutely. In the loss mitigation space, what we've seen is the byproducts of these situations that were just discussed here. The increase in vehicles with either longer retail terms and those models coming in and hitting the volume inventories that we see, we've seen consistent increases in those numbers. And that also reflects a couple other factors that Peter talked about earlier as far as the technology impacts that come into play here. We have a major focus from lenders on not only improving and increasing that technology space to provide information in a more real-time fashion, but we also have the drive of what the customer experience is in the field and how that's going to impact them downstream. So those drivers there are big factors from last year and are going to continue to carry into 2018.
No, thank you for that. One of the trends, or maybe, and Peter called it disruptive, or however we may want to categorize it, has been this evolution or revolution of companies that are converging the retail and wholesale space together. And Brian made note, you look at a CarMax, you look at our Carvana, you look at an AutoNation, which is making strides and doing things a little bit differently than they have in the past. Brian, can you start that conversation for us? And Nick, Peter, Dave, I'd love for you guys to kind of dive in on your thoughts as to what you're seeing from that aspect of the industry.
Sure. I think with the convergence of retail and wholesale, I think one of the lightning rods to that is digital retailing. So when you look at the sort of momentum in the market behind digital retailing and either doing fundamental research and constructing a deal online to potentially completing an entire transaction online, in just north of 40% of the cases, a trade is attached. And so I think what you're going to see relative to the retail and wholesale world colliding is we need to have a better solution for that trade-in value inside that equation. So when you look at the wholesale side of the business, it's much more comfortable transacting on sight unseen, simulcast, business-to-business type platforms. And I think what's going to happen is that's going to need to come forward into the consumer to be able to help complete that transaction. And ultimately, sort of with the advent of all this information that we have, when you've got buyers and sellers with equal amounts of information, you start to move more towards commoditization. So what I think you're going to be able to see is to take values and get tighter bands on them based on the information that we have today, which ultimately make the market more efficient and allow the retail and wholesale worlds to kind of connect in ways that they haven't before.
Yeah. Nick, thoughts?
Yeah, this conversation goes all over the board. I mean, when you think about, like you say, the Carvanas and some of the companies that are starting to play in this space, everybody wants to be able to place a real value on the car at wholesale, and yet there's margin compression on the retail side. So you start to get to that point. What is the difference between wholesale and retail?
Yeah.
And I'm sure somebody will come up with a term for it somewhere soon. So, each one I think is playing in a space that's a little unknown right now. What's interesting though is as we continue to go down the road of more cars sold, wholesale, more cars sold online, I start to wonder about the valuations that are coming out because through price discovery. I was having this conversation earlier today. Price discovery really starts with the physical auction. And so when these cars are more and more sold online at a buy now price, to quantify that data, to be able to get to price discovery is going to be interesting. And there's a lot of smart people out there working on it, but it's, is it a slide backwards or is it an advance forward? Don't know. But I think over the next 12 months or so, we're going to see a lot of change in this space, and we're going to see a lot of these companies that we're talking about either in or out.
Yeah, interesting. Peter, Dave, add additional points to that?
I guess maybe one comment I'd say, the companies that I see being the most successful, I think they're focusing on the customer experience. So we talked about some of those online retail channels. I think they're looking at that existing experience for the retail customer. And for many of those retail customers, it wasn't a great experience. They wanted something different, something better. And I think the insight behind these companies was and TrueCar is part of that as well, I think, is to say, how can we sort of improve that customer experience, and then that creates an opportunity and a market power for them. And you can take that into the wholesale market. We need to focus on our customers' experience and make that a better experience for them. I think, Nick, your point on the price discovery of the auctions is a good one, an interesting one. I think that's really been the value of the in-lane experience, has been that price discovery mechanism. And that's been a very sustained advantage that physical auctions have brought for decades now. I do see a number of things happening that challenge that a little bit. You've got the data analytics aspect, which is, bringing just, the power of computing and a lot of smart people. Can you do price discovery through data? You can certainly get closer than we could in the past. I don't know that you can get all the way there yet. And then the other one is, can you get price discovery through bidding formats that don't require, say, the infrastructure of physical auction? Can you get price discovery on digital channels? And I would say the first generation of digital channels didn't really get that. And I was part of that wave, you could say. But I do see, with businesses like TradeRev, there's real price discovery going on a platform like that. And it's at a low friction. So I think models like that have the potential, both coming in from the data analytics side, but also coming in from the technology side of being pretty transformative to our business. Exactly how far and how fast, I can't say, but there's clearly value there.
Yeah.
I think one of the key things there that I think you guys are working on is using the data to have a higher likelihood of sale across all the platforms. And so I think taking away bidding fatigue is going to be a really big part of what you just described, which I think is sort of the first step in leveraging, quote unquote, big data in a platform.
Right.
I think going back to the customer experience piece that you're referencing, obviously in the loss mitigation world, the repossession experience itself isn't one that is typically a fun experience for the consumer, and fundamentally probably negative.
Everybody
in
loves
that
it.
regard.
Love it.
So one of the things that we focus on is how do we make that experience a little bit better? Because let's face it, that consumer is going to end up needing a car again in the future. And there's a variety of means they have by which to get that vehicle. They can go back to the same lender, they can go to another lender, but what they experience throughout that process is a touch point that has to be factored in and measured with the personnel that are operating those operations. And that's something that we take a big focus on, and know that it's important to our lenders, and ultimately the lenders are contracting with the auction, or they're wanting us to handle remarketing for them, or whatever the case might be, but those touch points exist and are important to measure.
We've done it somewhat as this conversation has developed a little bit, but as we've taken a look back, we've only begun to take a look ahead. So what I'd like for each of you to kind of crystal ball a little bit are some of the trends that you're watching that you think are going to impact your business decisions moving into 2018. What trends, what technologies, maybe it's other companies, I don't know, maybe it's people at other companies. But I'd really be interested to hear, without divulging the complete trade secret, the types of things that you're looking to occur and expect to occur in 2018 that are going to impact your businesses in the specific, in the lanes that each one of you guys are in. And Brian, do you mind starting that?
Sure. It's, in our world, it's nice to think that the calendar year, the struggles and topics will flip over, but we often know that they won't. So I think what you're going to see in the world that I live in is continued focus on attribution, and more specifically across digital. In the past, you had newspaper and radio. The first version of digital was really online classifieds, autotrade.com and others, and cars.com, and they're efficient marketplaces. And really what you did was a lift and shift of the newspaper onto online, and that was a big movement. But now what you've got is you've got traditional classifieds, you've got social, you've got display, you've got search, you've got SEO. So going back to what I talked about earlier with the cost per vehicle retail advertised going higher, what dealers are really going to be focused on this coming year is not maybe solving the whole puzzle, but at least identifying that the bottom 15 to 20% of their portfolio that has a bunch of low yield, low return marketing in it, and either eliminating it entirely or curbing it off so that they're shifting their spend to more efficient mediums. That's really going to be a big thing in the space that I particularly play in.
Nick, can you chime in on that? And then Dave and Peter will wrap this part of it with you.
Yeah, I think 2018 and beyond, I think one of the big things we're going to see in our space is the use of data. Analytics, artificial intelligence, fill in the blank on whatever you want to call it. But we're seeing more and more of that driving decision making and helping people get to a better outcome. I think the other thing that we're going to see, and we're going to spend a lot of time focusing on over at our company, is, and I'm going to say it's not going to be digital and it's not going to be physical. It's going to be about creating the marketplace. And once you create the marketplace, really then allow customers to do business how they want to do business. I think the day of measuring you got to have this % of your cars in one channel is over. You really got to get back to the customer experience. I think as Peter was saying also, it really driven by the customer experience and creating simple tools for both buyer and seller to use to come to the market to do business how they want to do business. And again, it's no different than in any other channel that's out there. You move out of automotive, and I mean, if you think about Amazon or Walmart or any of the big retailers, it's really them creating a marketplace and allowing people to do business how they want to do business, not how we tell them to do business. And probably the last thing is more on, I'm going to call it emotional branding, playing the brand to the people's emotions versus to what we think is important.
Yeah, good points. Dave?
The emotional branding point there, that's an interesting one. I like that. the fact of the matter is perception can be reality sometimes. So it's important to respond to that, and it's important to engage with the things that are important to your customer base, right? So the lending community has made it clear that they're concerned about what takes place in the field with the repossession process for us, and therefore what their customers are being charged in the field for various fees, the experience that they're having on the agent level. Those are things that we've learned are an area of focus for the past really couple of years, but it's really something that we've had to bring along in the space and work with our agent network to find the solutions and bridge those gaps in those spaces and offer technology solutions that help facilitate those processes better, that help drive the information to the agent. We've seen consistent upticks in our reinstatement numbers year over year, along with our repossession numbers. And that means that there's a lot of cars out there being repossessed, but there's also a lot of cars where we're putting the customer back in the vehicle and getting them back on the road again. So areas of focus in those areas are going to continue to be major staples for us in 2018.
Good. Peter?
I guess a lot of what Nick says resonates. I think we're looking at the power of the platform, the physical assets, the digital assets, not just the vehicle remarketing, but inspection and data products and logistics and repossession services. Trying to bring those together in the word we use is seamless customer experience in a more seamless way for our customers. And I think that's one theme. I'd say leveraging data analytics is another theme. And continue to grow the business, obviously, continue to listen to our customers and competing and hopefully winning their trust with the business. I'll also say that we are looking at, there's a lot of pretty major fundamental changes in the automotive industry. They're probably, past 2018, right? We hear about autonomous cars and ride sharing and electrification of vehicles. So there's big trends where I'd say canary in the coal mine, watching some of those trends too. How are they starting to play out in 2018? Are those what is the pace at which those things could change the way vehicles are owned and purchased and operated? So I don't think any of us can predict that future, but we're watching those trends closely to see what are the likely bigger impacts longer term.
Definitely. And to follow up on that, are there any other industries that you guys watch very closely? You mentioned obviously in Amazon, Walmart, what they do in terms of a sales process. Are there other industries that you think are really good barometers in terms of what the automotive industry that you guys can kind of learn from?
So for us personally, we take a look a lot at travel and real estate. Some of the trends that have happened there, where you've really created what we would consider to be the modern marketplace digitally, where there's much more consumer control, there's much more social engagement. So we kind of look at what's happened there, and what you basically have is a bunch of, so for instance, with travel, you had all these airline sites where you go and book a ticket, and then you overlay folks like Expedia and others on top of that, and now you've created these marketplaces that have this really efficiency and reach, and they do it in a way that is convenient to the consumer. So we study those quite a bit in terms of thinking about how we grow from a new car-centric auto buying program to a much more end-to-end digital provider. We take quite a look at that all the time.
Yeah. Nick, did you have additional thoughts?
I'm not sure if there's any specific industry that we look at, but we spend a lot of time looking at consumer behavior.
Yeah.
And the reason being is, dealers are consumers. And so when they're not being a dealer, they're probably having consumer behavior trends. And just to look at what they're doing, so you're not recreating the wheel and trying to teach them new ways of doing things they already know how to do.
Right.
So really just consumer behavior and how they, navigate social media, navigate the internet, and how their buying habits work today. So consumer behavior, not a specific industry.
No, good point. Dave or Peter, did you guys have any thoughts with regard to that?
Yeah, I think the consumer behavior point is a valid one. One of the ways that we pay particular attention to that is obviously with the regulatory oversight in the banking and finance industry. CFPB and different regulatory bodies like that, their findings, their expectations, we're fortunately privy to that through a lot of our lender partners, and we're able to get out ahead of some of those sort of things and use that as drivers for our business. So that helps us dictate what the consumer base is ultimately looking for. And then also along with trade associations and things of that nature. The one other space that we've been looking at a little bit is some of the auto finance extensions in other countries and things of that nature. As you start to see auto financing increase in other areas, you've obviously got a presence with the Canada market, and there's some other things going on, overseas as well too, where you're starting to see those increases. So I think that's an interesting point as well.
Yeah, and Nick and Peter, I know both of you guys have significant overseas operations as well. Are those helpful? Are you learning over there, or are you taking what we're learning here, taking it over there? How do you approach, Nick, from that perspective? Especially, I know an RMS, I think, originated right in the UK.
Yeah. Yes. So I would tell you that every country is different.
Yeah.
We were just recently in China rolling out a platform over there, and they've leapfrogged certain things, and they may use like WeChat for everything that they do. And then you may go to Spain, except maybe August, where everybody's on holiday, and they have a different view of the world. And terminology is so different. Upstream, as an example, upstream means one thing here in the States. You go to the UK, upstream, selling a car upstream, the consumer still has the car. There are some commonalities when it comes down to, yes, buying and selling a car, but data protection laws, language barriers, tax issues, where they are in their curve, it's very different in every country that we go to.
And Peter, I'm guessing from your accent, you're not originally from Indiana?
Not from Indiana, and actually I did spend quite a bit of time in China this summer, so it was definitely an eye-opening visit. And it's true, in some respects, I felt like Stone Age, taking cash out of my pocket where everybody else is paying digitally over there. It's kind of crazy, but I didn't have whatever app they were all using. But I think we're looking at what's going on globally for sure. We're spending more time probably on strategy and where do we focus our resources. And I'd say the other one we're looking at is just innovation. How do it's a changing world. It's a rapidly changing world. How do we harness innovation? How do we be, how does a larger company be innovative? And, there's a role for acquisition, but you also want a role for sort of internally generated innovation as well. So that's a big theme in our company too, because it seems to me that ultimately a company to prosper in this world that we're moving into, we're going to have to be innovative and nimble and very responsive.
Yeah. And we have just a few minutes left, and thank you for what's been a great conversation. So I appreciate you gentlemen being a part of this. But Peter, we'll start on that end, and we'll just work it back toward me. Again, Brian, we'll let you have the last word. But if you can, understanding we've got an audience of executives from all across the industry, from the repossession side, from the auto finance side, from the wholesale side, from the dealer side, the retail side as well. What I'd like each of you to do is just think about a kind of a parting thought. Something that you might leave with this group, whether it's something they should be watching, something they should be doing within their organizations, your recommendations. But again, as leaders within your own companies, you probably thought about some of these things, and I think it'd be valuable for the audience to hear some of that. So, Peter, again, we'll start with you,
Sure.
Nick, Dave, and then Brian, you'll have the last word, and we'll wrap it up.
Well, this one's probably a little far out, but I'll throw it out there anyway because, a few months ago I got signed up in this newsletter that comes out weekly. It's the Week in Mobility. So mobility is the name for this, encompassing ride-sharing, autonomous vehicles, electrification, and everything that's going on in those sort of spaces. This newsletter comes out every week. There's 10 articles in it. And I try and read every article. And by the end of that 10 articles, my head hurts.
Yeah.
Right? It just hurts because there is so much going on. And so much of it is in the lab, right? And there's so many experts who are predicting with great levels of confidence vastly different scenarios, right? Scenarios that this will increase the number of cars sold, scenarios that nobody will own cars anymore. So what's clear to me is nobody knows what that future is, but I think it could be a radically different future. When I was in China this summer, in Beijing, you can't put 30 million people, give them a car and think the city's going to work. It doesn't work, right? So there's a future coming at us that I think could be very, very different. I don't fully understand what it is, but I'd encourage all of us who are in this industry and who have livelihoods, built livelihoods in this industry to pay attention to those trends because, they could come faster than we think.
Very good. Nick.
Since Peter took the long view, I'm going to take the short view because I agree with what he said. That it's a very, very different world coming down the road. But maybe on the short-term side, maybe two areas to focus on. And the first one's not necessarily that short-term and will carry forward, is get to know and understand your data. It's just so powerful. And build your resources around your data analytics and I call it your smart people in your organization, because it is so powerful once you can harness that information. And so many people in the automotive space have so much data that's just not being put to good use on how we have to go forward. I think the second one, maybe is an underlying piece to probably everybody in the room, is get to know and understand used car values. And what I mean by that, and where I'm going with that, is it's always kind of the last step in the process. We sell a car, but then it comes back from a lease or from a repossession, and there's a value associated with it. And it really keeps the industry going, with the number of used cars being sold. And so often it's a lost art. But it's important for the CPO, it's important for your repo collections. It's just important for leasing to go forward. Without a strong, good understanding of the used car market and the values associated with, we tend to see these markets collapse like we have in these different cycles over the last many, many years.
Very good. Dave.
You know, the data and analytics is a great point, Nick. I would challenge everybody to use that information to make your decisions and allow that to help with the roadmap, if you will. As long as you're using that information correctly, I think it's going to help you get down the path to where you need to be. There's a reason why people do business with companies like ours. And it's because they want to partner with experts in the industry and in our field, and this is what we do. So if you want a company that provides vendor management solutions, we're going to be able to do that for you. Sure, you can assign out a repossession yourself. You can do different things in-house. But if you partner with the people who make that their living and are the experts in that field, you're probably going to be a little bit more successful in the long run. And I think as we get into increased scrutiny with regulations, with consumer protection laws and concerns for that customer experience, the more important all of these elements that we talked about here today will become.
Thank you. And Brian, you have the last word.
Sure. It's always good to have the last word, especially when there's a drink behind you. It's always tough. So
Momentum.
Maybe two things for me. I think one, you heard, I think everybody up here talk about sort of serving the customer and listening to their needs. And I couldn't agree more. TrueCar learned a valuable lesson around that last couple of years for those of you who weren't paying attention. But so I think for us though too, I think what really the reality of the next X amount of years in short and long run is that the customer's customer is really going to change the shape of what all of us do, and that is the consumer. So I think that while the automotive industry is moving rapidly and evolving quickly, I think we could agree that it lags several other verticals in terms of what the overall experience is and how technology is adopted, because it's a very high-priced, sophisticated transaction. So I think as that evolves, it's not only going to change what the average retailer's business look like, it's going to change, I think, everybody up here downstream of that, what our businesses look like to be able to serve that. So I think that's really something to pay attention to and not to underestimate how that's going to influence all of our businesses. And then I think just from a maybe near-term perspective, one of the things that our folks and our team always talk about, and a phrase that I've adopted over the years, is just operating with purpose and urgency. So, basically, as you see these opportunities, know what they are and go after them wholeheartedly and, jump on it now, because you're in a very competitive market with a lot of innovative players, both in retail and in the remarketing space. And so as we as our businesses, whether you're working for a big firm or own your own shop or work for a dealer, I think all of us in this sea of change need to be ready to capitalize on what opportunities are in front of us.
Very good. How about a round of applause for our panel this afternoon?